professional channel. So if you don't wish to appear on camera, turn your camera off and you won't appear. But we do put them out in the public domain for people to look at. I think 6 people viewed one of our videos, which was quite a record. So it's not the most, nobody's going to make any money out of monetizing our content on YouTube, but we will start recording it. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for coming along today. Welcome to Show and Tell 16 from the 11th of November 2021. As was mentioned earlier, I'm in the office today, which is nice. Good to see people again. Good to start feeling like we're coming back together a little bit as a team. We've done really well as a team over the last 18 months to create that real sense of team cohesion, but it's nice to be back in the office and see people and bump into people that you haven't seen for a while. So what's our vision for the website? We will give our residents more free time by making everything they do with the council faster and easier. You'll see a little bit later in this, and where this has been a little bit brought to life, because we've sort of avoided having a kind of strategy, I feel like a digital strategy, for quite a long time, but we've always had this vision. And some of the work that Ali and Lawrence are going to talk about a little bit later around schools is really shows this off in a really great way to show how this vision actually underpins everything that they've been doing. So it's actually really key to what we do. How do we do it? Lots of service engagement. You've heard me talk about this before, but we're really key that we design our content in a user-centered way. So rather than necessarily telling the people what we think they want to tell them, we only publish content that meets their needs. We've done lots of talking about this. We've talked about things like the process that we follow, what that means from our side, and what we expect from you as a service designer or as a service owner. There are lots of things that we'll talk about a little bit later. The principle of this is obviously start small, then iterate. We don't aim to boil the ocean. So we build those council services to start small. We have a notion of a thing called a minimum viable product, which we release as soon as we can, as soon as there's a customer value in releasing it. And then we review it and we test it, and then we make improvements and we iterate, and we continue to do that. Certain things that we need from the service when we engage with them, you'll see a list of them there. I'm not going to go through them, but it's really important that we get that buy-in from service and have a really strong product owner in the service area. And that really helps us. So some stuff that we've done in the last couple of weeks. This is our show and tell every couple of weeks, as you know. We're going to talk about planning and building. So Louise and Eva are going to talk us through that. We're not talking about client transport today. Client transport we're saving up for the next one. So that's not actually coming in today. Schools, IA, and wider recommendations. Some of the stuff I talked about earlier. We've got Abby and Lawrence talking about that. And then some more work on looking at content patterns. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Eva, who's going to talk to you about planning and building.
Thanks very much, Pete. Good afternoon, everyone. So yes, let's fill you in on what we've been doing over the past couple of weeks in planning and building. We went live with several more journeys. We've been keeping you up to date on the journeys that have gone live every couple of weeks. And the next tranche went live last week, Tuesday. They form part of the Building and Improving Your Property content theme. And as you can see from the titles of the journeys on the screen, all of them revolve around how to make improvements to, how to get permissions for, how to find out what you can do to your property. So we've got journeys including check if you can work on a tree. That includes information about tree preservation orders, if a tree's in a conservation area, what you can and cannot do to it. We've also got information regarding working on a property in a conservation area, looking at listed buildings, and of course, important key journeys, such as making a building regulations application. So they all went live and we've had very good feedback so far. And yeah, the idea, as Pete just outlined, was to get these journeys published as soon as we believe that they can add value to all of the users that come to the Buckinghamshire website, making the journey seamless, easier to use, and to flow better as well, so that users can find the information that they need really quickly and easily and can complete their transactions without any delay or without any confusion. So next up, on the next slide, please, we're going to be publishing content within the planning policy content theme. So we have here journeys that contain tons and tons of guidance and policy documents around really important things such as local development plans, neighbourhood planning and planning reporting. So within these themes, there are lots of journeys and there's lots of information as well. Neighbourhood plans are very important. We've included content around how to form a neighbourhood planning group, how to put together a neighbourhood plan. And of course, we also have signposting to all of the neighbourhood plans that are available throughout the county and all of the associated supporting evidence and documentation as well. And for local development plans, as the name suggests, we have signposting to the main local development plan for Buckinghamshire and all of the other ones for the other regions. And planning reporting looks at brownfield registers and all of the monitoring reports as well that have to be produced and also published throughout Buckinghamshire. So that's what we'll be including on all of those journeys. And then on the next slide, you'll see that there's also some other content that we're going to be going live with. And that forms part of our other planning and building content theme. So we're looking at request a search on a property that you're buying, a very key journey, using our building control and planning services. We know how important it is to highlight the discretionary services that are available within the council to all users. So we want to make sure that that's very easy to find and it's very prominent and that users can access that information very easily. We're also including journeys regarding regional national projects. There's a lot happening, there always is, and users want to find out about it, how they can get more information, how they can complain, how they can have a say. So we're ensuring that they can do all of those things and they can find their way to all of those key areas as easily as possible. So that's what's going to be coming up from next Tuesday. And of course, when we're next with you, we'll be able to update you on how all of that has gone. What I'll do now is I'll pass you over to Louise, who's going to do a quick demo of some of those pages that went live.
Thanks, Eva. I'll just share my screen. Okay, right, so as Eva mentioned, we've had quite a lot of new content that's gone live. So what I'm going to do is just navigate to where that can be found so you know where to go to look for it. So just go to Planning and Building Control, and the new content that we've just published last week is all sitting under Building or Improving Your Property. So if I click on this, we can see all of the new pages here. Now there were a few on this list that were already published, so apply for planning permission, demolish a building or structure, and get advice before you build or do home improvements. They were already live. They just weren't sitting under this this theme at that point, but now we've had a restructure. Now most of the journeys are now live. We've been able to put them all in the right place. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take you through a couple of these new journeys that we have. I'm going to start actually, I'll just mention first of all, this first one, check what you should do before starting work on your property. This is a simple guide that just tells you what you should do, what you should look for, what you can check just before you start to work on the property. And this just links out to our other journeys that are in this under this theme. So I won't go through this one, but that's just where it is. It's just a checklist. So if I now take you through, check if you need permission or approval for home improvements. So this journey tells the user that they may need both planning permission and building regulations approval, and it tells you straight away what the difference is between planning permission and building regulations. This takes you through to another page that we've got just to make it completely clear for those who are not aware. And we talk about what building regulations means, what it's for, and also reasons why you might not need building regulations approval, how you can contact the team if you think you do not need it. And there's more information here on how to make a building regulation application and reading more about it on gov.uk. So we tend to signpost out as much as we can if anybody needs further information, so as not to clutter these pages up too much. Then on the next page, we talk about planning permission, what you might need planning permission for, and we also link over here to the apply for planning permission page. We mentioned that not all projects need planning permission. You can apply for a lawful development certificate instead, and also what you might need planning permission for. So if your property is in a conservation area, if there's a heritage listing on your property. So this links through to two of our new journeys. I'll take you through one of these actually shortly. And also that you can check the planning application. So that takes you through to search or comment on a planning application page. And some other journeys here and some more signposting out to gov.uk and the planning portal about planning permission. Then after that, we take the user through to the planning advice service page. This just mentions that the council can provide planning advice, so it's directing the user to the discretionary service. So to find out if planning permission is required, if your development rights are no longer valid, and it signposts you over to our planning advice services and fees. And then if permission is refused, your options. So appealing it on gov.uk and reapplying for planning permission on the planning portal. Okay, so that's that first journey. And I'll just take you through one more quickly. So if we look at, let's look at find out about listed buildings. So this is one of our newer journeys that we created. So when talking to the team, we were discussing conservation areas, and originally we did have listed buildings information within the conservation area journey, but that we then decided with the team that actually it would be better sitting in its own separate journey. So that's what we've done here, find out about listed buildings. So first of all, we explain how the user can find out if their property is listed. We mentioned the Heritage Portal and the National List for England and reasons why it might not appear on that list. Then we talk about what listed buildings are, basically how buildings are listed and the gradings and what the grading system means, and how buildings are selected on Historic England. We then go through and explain how to apply for listed building consent and why you might need listed building consent, and the fact you can't carry out any work at all unless you have listed building consent. We mention seeking listed building advice, and also we mention that you might need planning permission and make a building regulations application. And then this is how you apply, by contacting the local planning team. We also mentioned the local heritage list as well. That's really important. And what the sort of buildings that the local list can include, buildings or parks or works of art. And direct the user to the local heritage list platform. And then finally, we mentioned get listed building advice. So again, this is the discretionary service. This takes you through straight to the heritage team, and it mentions that it can help to improve your chance of getting permission to carry out the work if you use this service, and also buying a listed building and reading more about the heritage conservation planning services and fees here. So that's what I want to talk you through, just a couple of the new journeys, but obviously feel free to take a look at all these pages, and any comments or feedback, then we're more than happy to hear it. Thanks very much. I'll just stop sharing my screen and I'll pass you over to Ali and Lawrence to talk about schools.
Thank you very much, Louise. There's obviously still lots of content in planning, but it replaces something like 750 to 800 pages that we previously had in planning. So there was a lot more, and it was a lot more complicated and convoluted than this is now. So some really great work that's gone on to simplify and really make those journeys as easy as possible. Okay, over to Ali, I guess.
Yeah, great, thank you. Next slide, please. So just to give a high-level overview of what we've been up to in the last sprint. So we've been sharing the recommendations decks. We put together all of our learnings from the schools discovery and had a series of recommendations out of that discovery. So we put that together in one deck, and we've shared that now with the internal team, and the next step will be to share that with the service areas and hopefully to start working through some of the recommendations out of that. We've also been creating a content plan. So one of the recommendations was to create a step-by-step journey, which we've shown in a previous show and tell, but that was just taking the parent through all of the steps they'll need to go through to apply for a secondary school place. So we've created a content plan for that step-by-step. And that just has in it all of the kind of like acceptance criteria and kind of like linking to the pages that might already exist on the council website, and kind of highlighting maybe when there might need to be a new page or any enhancements to existing pages. As well as that, we've been looking at the schools IA, so that's all of the tasks within the school section. So I'll go over that in a bit more detail on the next slide. So for the schools IA, as we kind of touched on at the beginning, our goal is always to save our users time. So we've kind of been looking at the school section and thinking about how we can restructure this to make it a little bit clearer for parents so they can get to where they need to go faster. So to do that, we've been kind of like auditing the existing IA of the school section. And then we've also kind of been looking at other councils and seeing how they structure their content. And we have created kind of like 3 variations now. These are hypotheses. These are what we've kind of hypothesized and seeing if they work. We've kind of, there's a few changes that we've made. We've kind of rewritten title links as actions. We've been grouping some content. So some of that is around transfer testing and grammar schools and also around appeals. We've then, in a couple of the other versions, we've kind of removed appeals as a section altogether. Because the content can be found within these step-by-steps. So we're kind of saying, will users know where to go to find that content if it's not in its own individual section? We're quite interested to see how that tests with users. And then we've also kind of like moved the admission section. So previously on the school site, it used to be schools and learning, schools, and then you'd go into admissions and you'll find all of that content within there. But we've moved that up a level to hopefully get users where they need to get faster. But we're going to be testing all of those 3 different variations within the next sprints. So we'll share with you some of those learnings next time. I'm now going to pass over to Lawrence to go over some of the recommendations.
Cool, thank you, Ali. Yes, so what have we got here? So as mentioned before, in this sprint we've been wrapping up and playing back some of our recommendations in a discovery report, which you can see on screen there. And so this has kind of covered a lot of the kind of content changes and incorporating this step-by-step pattern and moving content around, making transport easier to find, things like that. Things that are quite specific to the school's journey, to the secondary school's journey. But in doing that, and what I thought would be quite interesting to share with the wider audience is we've kind of come up with some kind of wider recommendations we think might be applicable to other service areas. They could be kind of wider design principles. They could just be useful for other people to know. So yeah, we thought we'd share them in this show and tell. So on to the next slide. Yeah, so we've talked about the step-by-step pattern many a time, and now it is in the wild. It is on Wagtail, so it can be used. We're thinking, how might we use this pattern going forward in other service areas, and also why we should use it. So what are the kind of criteria that we should use it for, and maybe can it open up the conversation around creating more guest service design experiences rather than just content. So yeah, on the left there we've got some criteria that we're kind of thinking about, but this is still a discussion that we're having, so it could perhaps be useful for presenting these kind of complex journeys more easily. Bringing together content that sits in different service areas or even different portions of the website, which kind of historically has been difficult to navigate. And also it acts as a sort of central reference point, like this kind of anchor point that a user can go back to and always knows, they can bookmark that place and put it in their bookmarks folder to come back to, especially if it's a very long journey and there may be many months between different interactions. So there's a number of other criteria that we're kind of having a discussion about later today, actually. But yeah, that we're thinking about, okay, so those are the kind of criteria. What might we kind of do with that? And there's some ideas on the right. So, for example, the process of adopting a child feels like, that might be quite applicable. Accessing some kind of some benefits or support, maybe like this idea of a moving to Bucks service where that might that might incorporate council tax, that might incorporate waste services, registering for certain things, where there's a lot of different service areas that might want to be involved. So that's kind of an interesting ongoing discussion, and actually we're having a discussion today about it. If anybody on the call would like to come to that, do reach out and we'll see if we can fit you in. That's at 3 o'clock, so shortly after this. Next slide. Yeah, so in addition to the step-by-step, we've also been thinking about design principles that might be more universal. So when we were thinking about the user needs for the secondary school application, there were some things that kind of felt like, well, this might be relevant actually across the board. So some of those things are informing users what's going to happen next after a step. So particularly if there's a long wait between actions, saying, okay, it's going to be 2 months until you can hear something. And also who's going to contact them and how. So you're going to be contacted by this team, probably through this channel, email or letter. So yeah, really kind of like bridging the gap between these steps and also potentially the service areas that are going to be in contact with them, just offer more reassurance and potentially reduce the amount of inquiries. There's also a sort of universal principle around nudging users for key deadlines, particularly users that may not use the website all that much and may need a bit of nudging. This came from in the schools project. We found that repeat users, so return users, people who had already applied for a previous child's application, when they came back, they were much less proactive, and so nudging was quite relevant for them. And then the final one is about reducing explaining jargon or internally used terms. So I think at the very least, explaining what they are so that users know whether that applies to them or not. And then the final point there is we have been considering experimenting with the change in tones. At the moment, Bucks has a very clear kind of style guide, which is quite neutral and quite authoritative, but there are times when that potentially you may want to switch up a bit and potentially use a more emotive tone, for example, around high stress points in the journey. So for example, when you receive an offer and it might not be the offer that you expect, can we use a slightly more reassuring tone at that stage? That's something to consider, really. And that's it for design principles. Yeah, so this is what Pete was mentioning earlier on. We've been thinking a little bit about, we've got this strategic vision that we see at the beginning of every show and tell, which is really nice. It's really concise and it makes a lot of sense. And we've been thinking about these design changes that might be useful for schools. We've been trying to find ways to bridge that gap. So thinking about these strategic objectives that you can see on screen there, which we think help to meet that vision. Ideally, all the design changes should be addressing or adding or building towards these kind of objectives. So helping users spend less time finding information, helping users get the right outcome first time, presenting users with the right level of information, and encouraging users to make decisions early. So this kind of came from what we think is appropriate for schools. So it's a bit of an experiment to see, hey, maybe this is useful for another area, maybe it's useful for waste as well. And this could potentially form a bit of a discussion around what a digital strategy might look like, but it's kind of early days at this point. Yeah, I think that's it for that slide. Yeah, I think this is the last one. So just thinking about, this idea of a single source of truth when considering service delivery, content delivery. This came about because we understand that not all users will be using the website on its own in isolation. They'll often be using other channels, maybe other channels more than the website. And so users have an expectation that there's going to be a consistent content, consistent information. They're going to get the same, facts, whether it's on social media, whether it's on the website itself. And so one of our recommendations is, and I guess this covers more than just schools, is that these teams work together, continue to work together. So service areas, digital team, comms, customer service teams, to deliver this sort of uniform experience. And one thing to consider could be a sort of single source of information that would ensure a consistent voice and could potentially be globally updated. And so this, we're aware that this might take a little bit of wrangling, a little bit of work, but kind of aligning on this communication style and kind of coming together and maybe having kind of frequent kind of activities to bring this together and make it consistent, irrespective of how the user will get information. So yeah, trying to work towards this single source of truth. I think that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Lauren. Some really good stuff in there, and as I say, nice to see that support for that strategic vision coming through so strongly. Next up, just a little bit from Ali around content templates.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to give a little bit of an update of about what we've been thinking about. So on the Buck site, we've kind of got a very consistent way that we write content, and we've got certain templates that we have on Wagtail, but we wanted to kind of get together as all of the team and ensure that we were using these templates consistently across all of the different service areas, and to try and create kind of like a set of, not really like a set of guidance, so you know you're selecting the right template for a piece of content. So we got together as a team and we had a couple of examples, and we started to think about when these should be used and when they shouldn't. So it was quite easy to do for some types of templates. So the inline index and the long form content, we could quite clearly define when they should be used. But there was kind of some edge cases around information pages that kind of brought up some interesting discussion. But what we want to be doing with this is really identify if we need any new templates or if we want to kind of update or change any templates. So as people have been using them, sometimes it's kind of like it works really well, and other times it's kind of might want to make small changes. So this is just something I wanted to share a little bit of work in progress, and what we've been thinking about. So hopefully this will allow the team to have a bit more clear guidance around what template to use when. Well, that's me.
Great. Thank you very much, Ali. We've got 2 minutes left. If anybody's got any questions, I'll put them in the chat. Liz has mentioned about the social media channels that they've got in Family Information Service, which would be good to tie up. But yeah, anybody got any questions, drop them in the chat or speak up now. Otherwise, we will see you in 2 weeks' time. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.